Welcome to Opportunity Minded, a series for enterprise leaders, corporate strategists, and forward thinkers like you who want to drive business growth. Each episode focuses on a distinct strategic approach to help you unlock opportunities with actionable insights. I'm your host, Jessica, a producer at Euromonitor International, and today I'm thrilled to be joined again by Jonny York, who heads up our market strategy practice. The last time I spoke with Jonny, we talked about the ins and outs of market entry, and today he's back to talk about market penetration. So if you could magically increase your share of anything in life, what would it be and why?
Great. Yeah. And first of all, it's great to be back as well. I am a fairly new father. One thing that I would often like to do is really just increase my overall time that I can spend with my young family as well. So time, as we all know, it's very limited. We all have 24 hours in a given day. And just being able to understand how to prioritize and how to balance, things like work, personal interests, family time, and really see how we can carve out even more of that family time becomes important. So we start looking a little bit in terms of, what are the critical assessment criteria, if you will. We try to prioritize accordingly in order to sort of increase share, if you will, for time spent with my family.
That was very sweet and thought out. And I was just going to say for myself, it's 76-degree days because 77 is too hot and 75 is a little chilly. So your answer was much better. Since you already kind of brought us into talking about assessment criteria, let's go ahead and talk about market penetration. So can you tell us what market penetration is and how does it differ from market entry?
Previously, we talked about market entry, which was really more about sort of navigate the unknown a little bit, right? Looking at where am I going to grow and how am I going to grow. Market penetration is slightly different, not in the sense that it's, not looking at growth, but in the sense that it's really looking to win more within, a given market. And, no matter how big or small a given company is, it's all about sort of increasing your pie, your market share within that given market or product category.
What questions keep business leaders up at night when they're starting to look at market share?
A lot of times when we help out our clients, it's really more about tracking and understanding what's happening in the market, right? Just because, you're seeing, phenomenal growth on your end, there is a moment to kind of take a step back to say, okay, is this normal within the given industry, right? Am I hitting a curve that's quite high as compared to the overall industry, or am I, just below that for whatever reason? And I think I'm doing well, but others are suddenly doing better as well. So just having, keeping your pulse to your market, understanding how your industry is performing, how your competitors are performing in context to your own organization is really going to help alleviate a little bit more of that unknown stress, if you will.
So we're then kind of opening the door onto even more questions once those broader questions are answered. So how will CEOs ever sleep again? Is it just getting more granular with their data?
I recall speaking to a CEO of a publisher. He's also, sitting on the board of several consumer goods brand. And one thing that he sort of identified is that more often than not, you don't know what you don't know. So, just being able to go a little bit deeper, understand, where we're going to be able to uncover unmet needs, so identify gaps that consumers might have, is really going to help. And the best way to do this is sometimes really looking at more granular data and more granular information and just keeping on top of the market situation that you have in front of you.
And when you're taking the pulse of the market, of the industry, does the degree of market fragmentation matter?
Market fragmentation really depends on the industry, right? All right. I think numerically speaking, whenever we talk about market fragmentation, it means that, it's essentially a series of companies having a large share of that given market. For a market, for example, like beauty and personal care, there are so many subcategories within it. There's lipstick, there's color cosmetic, there's skincare. It's quite normal for leading brands to only be playing in several of these product types and therefore have a smaller market share. So you might see a series of like 3 to 5% market share who are leaders. And in that context, doesn't mean that they're fragmented, or does that mean that they play in a more niche market segment itself. This is exactly why data comes in a little bit more important, right? Because it's able to give you a little bit more of that precise knowledge towards how you're performing in the context of your product categories or your existing business as compared to others that might be playing the same space. Without that tracking nature, without those numerical indicators that you're seeing growth, or if you're seeing decline, if you're having higher market share, it's very difficult for you to have tactical decisions towards what is the clear next step for you. And that's what we've been able to support a lot of our clients to do, to really get into the nitty gritty.
So getting into the nitty gritty is probably what brings most of our listeners and our audience here today. So I'd like to talk about that. And I prepared a visual aid to help us out in this conversation. Jonny, can you please explain my visual aid?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, superficially and just surface levelly looking at it, it is basically four peas in a pod. But I believe you're also alluding to a framework that is called the four P's itself, which really stand for price, product, promotion, as well as place. And this is key components that you'd really consider, like you said, in a market penetration strategy. So I think, if we're talking very specifically about each of those P's in that context of market penetration, price really just talks about the overall price points in terms of the product categories. There's more to share on that in terms of how that might link towards the brand equity and positioning. Product very much just talks about the products that you're working with, the subcategories that's in that it's currently at, and is it a growing category or not. Whenever we talk about promotion, we talk about really more so about how you communicate your value proposition of your products to your consumers. And last place talks about distribution. So exactly how do we get those products to your consumers?
We wanted to hear a story about a company who increased their market share from our colleagues in research. So I reached out to one of our colleagues here at Euromonitor. Philip, our global insight manager for home care, told me about a consulting project that we undertook for a key client who was looking to grow their market share in the air freshening market, specifically across North America and Europe. And so I'd like to play that for you and see what you have to say.
We always say, a product should never really be this stationary thing, right? It should always be evolving based on how consumers are behaving, how they're shopping, how they're ultimately using products. So for our client, this meant pretty much exploring beyond traditional air fresheners. Yeah, we saw a significant trend. Premium fragrances traditionally found in perfumes and beauty products were making their way into the home. Think bespoke home scents, smart diffusers, essential oil mist diffusers, or even new applications you might not necessarily expect in the space. And our study provided a global vision of the fragrance experience, so highlighting how fine fragrances influencing home scents, also doing a deep dive into regional nuances, right? Because consumer preferences and behaviors can obviously differ between regions, yeah. And then we identified major segments, formats, product formats, scents, and then also claims that are evolving. And crucially, we gathered competitor insights. Yeah, so being informed on what your competitors are doing and launching as new products is a good way to continue having an advantage.
So what are you hearing there?
So I think looking at that particular case, it's very open in the sense of, the client being in a position of wanting to figure out, what are sort of the right fragrance to associate their products to the consumers a little bit, right? So there's a lot of understanding in terms of almost SKU level data to really understand the differences as well. So, just to associate those a little bit more. And that's often, tied towards, I guess more R&D related type questions that you might typically get, especially from, a fragrance type company, right? What type of fragrances do my consumers really care about? What are my competitors doing that I need to bear in mind as well, right? And again, there's an illusion in terms of, keeping track of your competitors, having that deep competitor analysis to understand what are the kind of product line that they're doing and how does that potentially stack up with your own product line as well.
I thought it was interesting how he talked about looking at adjacent categories as well. Is that something that's pretty common?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that often goes a little bit side by side in terms of identifying the opportunities that might be present as well. And that's something that, when you're doing deeper market penetration, when you're tracking on that market, you're often able to get indicators as to, okay, how are adjacent markets performing as well? What tracking studies do great, they're great at giving indicators of where future opportunities might be. So I would advise, perhaps on that category, there's a level of due diligence that still needs to be done.
All right, well, let's move on to the next one.
Our client understood that pricing strategy goes hand in hand with products as well, right? It goes with how you want to package your product, how you want to position your product, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we help them analyze the pricing of key players within both home care and beauty, examining their offers and then also how they position their products. Yeah, and obviously depending on your products, you might want to beat competitors in price with an okay product, that would appeal more to consumers that have a relatively high price sensitivity, or you go for a more premium pricing to reflect your brand equity. Yeah, for our clients with the interest in premium fragrances, this often meant exploring strategies for premium pricing that aligned with the perceived value of these sophisticated innovations and new offerings. Yeah. So we also consider price sensitivity. Your consumers are often quite price sensitive nowadays, but value depends on the consumer, right? Just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's high value. And our goal was to help them define pricing strategies that resonated with consumer perception of value, especially in the emerging premium segment.
What are we hearing about pricing? It sounds like it's all very interconnected here.
Yeah, definitely. The four Ps are in nature very interconnected, but I feel price ever more so is also quite connected to a larger brand equity story there as well. Felipe sort of mentioned it already. Price point competition often does become, the forefront of a tactical battle when we're looking at market penetration. But one thing that he sort of mentioned that I completely agree and resonate with is that price points is closely connected towards your brand equity and ultimately the consumers that you're going after, right? So if your product set or product series that you have is really designed to go after a more premium set, like the fragrance brand that Philippe was talking about, it really does mean that you can't really have such a low price point because it affects what you can put inside the product as well, right? What kind of ingredients can you bring out those, natural fragrances out? However, if you're a completely different player, if you're really focusing on the mass market, you're really wanting to play that volume game, you're going to get into that price war. You're going to find yourselves doing a lot of price point promotions, perhaps 2-in-1, buy one, get one frees, really leveraging what we would typically call key consumption periods for consumers to, again, maximize your volume sales.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next P then.
And when we move on to promotion, this is where marketing strategies come alive. So we looked at what kind of marketing channels are your competitors using to kind of gain top of mind awareness. But it wasn't just about where others advertise. It was also about ensuring your marketing messages connect with the right consumer groups, right? So our study identified key consumer trends and lifestyle changes driving the home fragrance evolution. And this allowed our client to craft targeted marketing messages that resonated with consumers, seeking a more elevated and personalized fragrance experience in their homes. We also explored how home care companies are briefing fragrance houses and partners for their product development, giving our clients insights into the creative and promotional pipeline of the industry.
So as Philip was talking about promotion, again, a lot of things sort of resonated with me as well. It's really about that communication and making sure that whatever is communicated is really resonating with consumers as a whole. So this unlocks a degree of better understanding your consumers. And again, Philippe sort of alluded to the fact of understanding how, home fragrances are shifting, their consumers' behavior towards those are shifting. Understanding what are the priorities for your consumer segment allow you to better communicate that value proposition within your marketing communication channels, right? So whether that's the choice of eventually going to social media or using out-of-home advertising, so on and so forth, that's really a decision the company needs to make, and also having an assessment as to how your competitors are communicating that message to consumers as well does help you navigate a little bit better as to the best shape and form to communicate the proposition that you have in place to your consumers.
For our clients, understanding distribution channels was crucial. So is it through supermarkets? Is it through department stores? Are we going through retail specialists? And this information informs your distribution strategy at the end of the day, right? While supermarkets might generate significant revenue, our analysis, supported by our comprehensive data, our internal tools, help them realize that specialist retailers are a missed opportunity for premium home fragrances. Yeah, so this meant tapping into new channels and adapting to change. And we identified examples of emerging fragrance players and new technologies, many of which are finding success outside traditional retail environments. Yeah, our insights helped our client to build a robust distribution strategy that reached consumers where they were increasingly looking for premium home scenting products, whether in specialized boutiques or online or even through unique subscription models. So our consulting project provided our key client with a comprehensive global vision of home fragrances.
All right, so place as distribution.
For a new product category that this fragrance company is really looking to further penetrate into, it means exploring some of the distribution channels that they may not necessarily be most familiar with. But in the case, you still need to have a good awareness on how these products are typically distributed in the market, especially for the premium type branding that you're looking for as well. So, whether specialist shops are going to be in missed opportunities, there's also a consideration as to your existing channels of distribution. Is there synergies that we can also create off the back of that? All that is important. And again, if we're looking at all four of these P's together, they're all intricately tied together. They're all intricately tied towards, the brand positioning, the equity story, the value proposition that you're trying to communicate to your consumer segments. And ultimately, all that information is really going to help deepen that market penetration. Right, so it's a bit more granular on every element that we've talked about, a lot of very tactical types of insights that you really need in order to arm your teams, whether that's marketing, whether that's sales, with a better understanding as to how are we going to go to market with this product and how are we going to get even closer to our consumer groups.
Thank you to Philip. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Jonny will unpack some common misconceptions and pitfalls that businesses can avoid. Then we're going to play a game where Jonny is going to test my knowledge about marketing.
Significant shifts in U.S. policies have the potential to undermine global economic growth, affect consumer sentiment, risk higher prices, and disrupt production and distribution networks. But for businesses ready to adapt, opportunities will arise. Bookmark our Trump Policies Hub at Euromonitor.com. With tools, expert advice, and data-driven perspectives, will help you navigate the shifting trade landscape with confidence.
Thanks for coming back. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about where businesses might get stuck in the process of market penetration. Are there any blind spots that you think could be avoided?
I guess just overall industry data on a top line, that often becomes, quite an obvious blind spot. So again, maybe using the BPC industry as a bit of an example, beauty and personal care. When you're looking at top line data, it doesn't really inform you on the behavior of things like color cosmetics or lipsticks or even skincare, just purely because the entire market, each of these products move a little bit on their own or are influenced by different factors as a whole. Another pitfall that I would potentially highlight is, perhaps whenever we're looking at information, we're using too out-of-date information. Our world nowadays is moving really quickly. Competition is very high at all given points across many consumer goods category. Relying too heavily on data from 2 years ago, even, it's already starting to inform you on or at least misinform you, if I will, on what is going to happen, what has happened to that extent.
Speaking then about our complex and fast-moving world, that kind of dovetails into my next question about challenges that companies might face when they're trying to increase their market share. Systemic shocks like the financial crisis or COVID-19 or sweeping policy changes, I'm sure, can make companies much more cautious in times like that. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that time and time again, right? We've seen the wait and hold approach. And I think, with the past Black Swan events, the things like COVID or even financial crisis, companies have often found themselves wanting to defend and maintain the market share that they have instead of, investing into the market and understanding. And perhaps more important during these times is actually just to really keep track of how the market is reacting, how your competitors are reacting and pivoting towards a way to maintain growth.
What about any other roadblocks that companies might face in this process?
When you're looking at something as important as market penetration, being able to navigate your data sets becomes incredibly important. Obviously, a lot of our clients do tend to use their own internal data, which is great, but it does become a bit of a blind spot. And when you see those blind spots, you try to reach out to secondary sources, publicly available sources, information. But then it becomes increasingly overwhelming, right? You have multiple sources telling you different things about the same topic, right? Typically, what we would see is a different market size for our clients' categories. And those numbers just you cannot consolidate it or reconcile that in any way, shape, or form, right? And we see a lot of our clients sometimes, scream to us to say, hey, we really, as an organization, need a single source of truth, right? Otherwise, it's impossible for us to set targets. It's really difficult for us to plan and move forward. Our mixed methodology, multi-source approach has really helped serve our clients within that market penetration, giving them the relative truth from where we have been able to collect our sources of information from.
All right, so let's say you've done it. You've increased your market share, you're a market leader, you're outperforming your competitors, your customers are chanting your brand name in the street. How do you carry on from that point? Like, what do you do? How do you hold on?
Continuous monitoring. That's probably the key word that I would really highlight. And again, sort of mentioning the fact that everything moves very fast. If you asked me this question 5 years ago, companies would have been keeping track of the market maybe once per year. As of the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen companies really step up in terms of the frequency of reviewing what's happening, looking at things at a biannual basis, quarterly. In the most extreme cases, I've even seen monthly as well. But once you've gotten to a point, as you've mentioned, Jessica, where everyone's chanting your name, you're number one, we don't want to be stagnant there, right? And again, that's where the continuous monitoring element comes into play, right? By keeping pulse on the market, you're suddenly able to also be the first ones to identify potential areas to grow into, right? And I think it does pull us a little bit full circle to go back into the market entry topic that we talked a little bit previously as well, right? Market entry, it was really more about looking for the right opportunities, validating it, and prioritizing the investments accordingly, and then planning the way to get into that market. Market penetration talks about really winning in that given market, right? And once you reach that stagnant pace again, you then will find yourself in the space of, okay, I need to, perhaps go back to the concepts of that, looking for opportunities and growth potentials, and arrive us a little bit more towards that market entry side of things.
So once someone's done listening to this episode of market penetration, if they're following the formula, they need to go back and listen to our market entry episode again.
Well, I would say so, right? It's a good refresher. Let's put it that way.
Just keep going in cycles.
The market, market really fluctuates, I would say, and I think, again, leaders really need to, be in the forefront and think about these strategies. Different roles and functions might look at this a little bit differently. A CEO or strategy function executive, we might be looking this at a longer time span. We might be looking this like every 3 to 5 years, right? But if I'm a product manager or if I'm a brand manager, the way of how I'm thinking about this, it's in much smaller magnitude. I might be looking at, okay, what's my marketing cycle in that plan in that given year to increase sales, right? And again, these all work towards the same I would say planning process that comes into play, but they just run in different timelines and magnitudes. A good example was back in 2010s, right? When Apple and Microsoft were really more in the spotlight and heights of their competition, we really did see, both sides of the organization have hero products that come through the years. Whenever, Microsoft would sort of be in the spotlight for that given year, the Apple execs would often, imply that, it's good for Microsoft, but we'll get them next round. It's really a continual cycle.
Well, speaking of competition, it is time to do a little bit of a game to mix things up. So, inspired by our discussion about becoming market leaders, Jonny will show us a stat for how much market share the top 5 brands capture across certain categories in different geographies based on data from Passport. And I'll have to guess whether those brands actually have more or less. Jonny, can you tell me what data we will be looking at today?
So we'll be exploring a few categories today. The first one, we're going to be looking at color cosmetics in Japan, followed by color cosmetics in South Africa. We're also going to explore some dishwashers in Australia, as well as Spain. And we'll look at homewares in US and Brazil, and we'll sort of wrap up maybe with passenger cars in Germany.
A new car? Wow. Well, if you haven't guessed it by now, the game is called More or Less. It's usually played as a progressive game, meaning I have to guess correctly on each question to move on to the next, but Marissa already pulled all of this data and I refuse to let it go to waste. But if I do get them all right, I believe, just like Jonny said, I will get a new car. So, Jonny, are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready. The bigger question is, are you ready, Jessica?
We'll see.
Let's start with the first one. Top 5 brands in color cosmetic in Japan. We currently have a number 30%. Do you think that the top 5 brands added in accumulation exceeds or is less than that 30% market share?
I think it's, oh boy. So I know that there are some really big brands that are like international brands, but I think that there are also a lot of brands. So my gut is that it's a fragmented market, and so it's going to be less.
Yep, that's absolutely true. The top 5 brands actually only account for 23% of the color cosmetic market in Japan.
All of my lotions that I put on my face are finally paying off. Okay, what do we got next?
Let's jump in the next one, color cosmetic in South Africa. We're going to continue using that 30% benchmark. Do you believe that the top 5 brands account for more or less than 30% of market share?
I'm gonna say more. There's just like a couple of big brands in South Africa.
Once again, you've got it right, Jessica. It is more, and I think it's largely accounting for the larger international brands that have really made their footprint within South Africa for color cosmetics.
Who knew this would be my specialty?
All right, let's move to a different category and a different market. For the top 5 brands for dishwashers in Australia, I currently have a number, 60%. Do you believe the top 5 brands are more or less than this number?
Gosh. I'm gonna say it's more. It feels like it's such a big number that I want to say more.
All right, your final answer, I'm guessing.
Well, yes, it's my final answer.
Well, good that you stuck with it. It is more. Again, dishwashers are actually surprisingly consolidated in Australia. Again, a lot of international players really have their foothold in Australia. Now, if we look at a different market though, let's say dishwashers in Spain. Again, I'm going to use 60% as that benchmark. Do you believe that it's going to be more or less than 60% for the top 5 brands for dishwashers in Spain?
I know that in general, Spanish culture is eating out a lot, and a lot of people don't have big kitchens. So maybe they don't have dishwashers. So there'd be like a lot of brands like trying to compete in this space. So I'm going to say it's less.
The answer is actually less, but not by a huge amount. It's actually 58% market share that the top 5 players do play for. Now, even though maybe on a volume standpoint, Spain may not necessarily have as much, even for households that have dishwashers, they typically might go for those larger international brands as well. So a fun fact for all. Right, let's move on. Now we're switching up categories once again. This time we're talking about homewares. So this one's homewares in the US, right? And I have the magic number of 20%. Do you believe that the top 5 brands account for more or less than 20% market share?
Less. Because I don't know what all of homewares is. I should know this, but I don't. And there's lots of people who sell homewares.
And you're right. It's actually less, 14%. Once again. So again, I think it just alludes to the fact that, within homewares, there's a lot of subcategories within it, right? So even with top 5 leading players, they may not necessarily be able to account for a vast majority. So quite different to the dynamics of something like a dishwasher. Now let's compare that with homewares in Brazil. Top 5 brands of homeware brands in Brazil, are they going to hold more or less than 20%?
I'm going to say less again. Am I going to break my streak?
The answer this time, it's actually more. 34% of market share for these top 5 brands. And again, this one's slightly different. Brazil does have a lot of home manufacturers for homewares as well. So we actually see a little bit more local brands coming into play and locking in their footprint in the mix as well.
Well, then if I lost that one, I wouldn't technically be playing for the car, but we're going to do it anyways.
Okay, in that case, let's keep going with the cars then. So the last one is passenger cars in Germany. So do you believe the top 5 brands for passenger cars in Germany, do they account for more or less than 70% market share?
I mean, BMW. So I'm going to say more.
So the answer is actually less, 52%.
No.
I think
I'm
when
not
you
going to win a Beamer.
Exactly, a lot of European brands there, nonetheless. So
Okay.
again, a little bit more fragmented than what we would have, but it's still at 52%. So it's still quite a consolidated market.
Well, I didn't win the car, but this has been extremely informative. I didn't know that I knew so much. So I appreciate that. Before we go, if you could give one piece of advice to a company trying to improve their market penetration strategy, what would it be?
I'm probably going to loop a few advices into one big advice, but the key one here is really to make sure that you're keeping up to date with the market, with information that's relevant to you and that's also updated. Right. Again, I think we've seen too many companies sometimes rely on too historical information or information that might not be apple to apple comparison with them, which makes it very difficult to plan. And I think, for a lot of our clients that sort of been working on some of these tracking studies with us to really understand how to further penetrate their markets, they've seen a lot more ROI actually in their decision making time spent. So a lot less time spent on decision making and a little bit more time spent on actually actioning some of the plans.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Opportunity Minded, brought to you by Euromonitor International, the first destination for organizations seeking growth. A big thank you to Philip and to Jonny for sharing their expertise with us today. Jonny, where can people get in touch with you?
Feel free to find me on LinkedIn, Jonathan York, as it sounds. Otherwise, always feel free to talk with your Euromonitor account managers. I'm sure they're happy to connect us together as well.
Stay connected with us on social media or visit our website to explore more resources and join our community. Until next time, stay opportunity minded.
I would say peas in the pod.
But how many?
4 peas in the pod, very specifically.